Welcome to Leading with Artivism. Leading with Artivism is a live monthly interview series created and curated by Poet Gold in collaboration with Arts Mid-Hudson, featuring a diverse mix of artivists, artist activists who have taken up the charge through their art to highlight social issues. We invite you to ask questions and get an inside look at the hearts and minds of these courageous creatives.
It would be nice if you could hear me, right? Welcome, everyone, to Leading with Artivism. I am your host, Poet Gold, and our guest today is Carol Bash. And before we begin, I'd like to give a shout out and a big thank you to the Junior League of Poughkeepsie for their support in our program. So, I'll give you just a little idea of who Carol Bash is. She is the founder and president of Paradox Films, an award winning documentary filmmaker with over 25 years of experience. Her most recent film, a short titled Morning at Hemlock Farm, is a silent film showcasing the natural beauty of Peekskill, New York, and a local farm. So let's look at that short first. Let's bring Carol on. That was beautiful. I want to say to the viewers once again that was a silent film of yours. What was the inspiration behind that film, Carol?
Well, thank you for having me, Poet Gold. It's a pleasure
Yes.
to be here. And also, I want to thank Arts Mid-Hudson for having me. So, Morning at Hemlock Hill Farm is a foray for me into editing.
Mm.
My experience is in producing, directing. I've done archival research. I edited on film when I went to film school, so that's dating myself. But I love the process of editing. You know,
Mhm.
I always did like it, but I never really learned editing when it became digital, on
Okay.
the computer.
Mhm.
And took a Adobe tutorial and just said to myself, let me just start with some outtakes that I have from a previous documentary that I
Mhm.
did, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and just try putting something together. And so that was my inspiration. I remember also just how I just really love the footage of
Mhm.
Hemlock Hill Farm that was shot for the documentary. It's actually a farm that's right down the street from where I grew up.
Okay.
And yeah, so it was just an experience, an experimental foray into my first stab at editing digitally.
Well,
Digital.
I'm going to say bravo to you. You did a good job.
Thank
And I love the fact that you said that you love the process of editing
you.
because you have to love the process of editing because it's a tedious process for some people, and I know some filmmakers who really I won't say necessarily appreciate editing, but just don't have the affinity for it. And so that's why, ergo, you have editors. So I'm glad to see that you're sort of branching out into that, because you probably have a really good eye for that.
Yeah, I like to think so. I always have ideas when I come to the editing room with my editor. It's always a collaborative process. It's not passive. But to me, editing is, I always like the idea of just putting your hands onto something to manipulate it. And to me, that's the editing process. To me, that's making the film, literally. Like I'm not a visual artist in the sense of drawing on canvas or anything. But for me, the editing process is where you're actually making the film.
Right.
And so, and just manipulating the images and the story and how you're going to interweave the different elements. So I find it's a tedious process, but to me, it's like that's the experience of putting the film together and making it, making the figure out of the clay, if you will.
Yeah, it's a great metaphor. It's building the story. It's like when we go into the studio for the mix, you're actually building now the story. You may have recorded or you may have shot, but some of the magic happens also. A lot of the magic happens in the editing process. We've had some great questions. I want to ask you, who has influenced your work the most, would you say? Or are there any influencers?
Okay. I'm gonna say two real quick ones. I would say the first one is Julie Dash. And for those who don't know Julie Dash, she is an African American female filmmaker. And around 20 years ago, she made to me, it was a spectacular film called Daughters of the Dust. And it was a period piece. It took place down south in South Carolina, where actually my grandparents are from. And it tells the intergenerational story of a family, a Gullah family. And, but it was just, to me, a visual feast for the eye. And it was also, it just imbued spirituality and history and food even. And of course, it was just a beautiful looking piece. And it was also just powerful in the sense that I saw myself on screen. This was a story that was centered around African American women. And I went to see that movie with my sister and my cousins, and we walked out of the film just, wow, that was the greatest thing we've ever seen. Like it just touched me, right? It touched us all right there. The film, the theater was probably filled with like 90% Black women, and we're all like, yes.
You felt a sense of celebration and honor in being a Black woman in America. You mentioned Gullah, so I'm going to ask you to share with our viewers who may not be familiar with Gullah and its people what that's about.
So the Gullah people are the descendants of African slaves that landed and stayed in South Carolina, and then they created their own culture, their own language. They had their own language, or it was like a patois. It was like a mix of the different African languages and English, and they stayed very true to the African heritage. And I would say, I'm not really sure, but probably Ghana was probably maybe the primary country.
I think it was.
And if you go down to South Carolina today, I mean, I think there are still communities that are very much entrenched in the Gullah culture. So that's Gullah. My people are not necessarily Gullah, but they're from South Carolina, and so it just hit home.
Got you. What started you on the journey of filmmaking and picking the subject matters that you've picked?
I would say my journey for filmmaking actually started in news. I was, before I got into independent cinema or independent filmmaking, I worked at CBS News. And I was at CBS News for like 7 years, primarily working at 60 Minutes. And then the Eye to Eye to Connie Chung show, which, went defunct. And that was the beginning of my career in television. So I started as a receptionist and then moved up to being like an assistant producer. And it was at News, towards the end of my time there, that I realized this is not what I want to do, and no disrespect to journalists and people in the news business at all. But for me, it just, it was limiting. There's a formula to the news story. I wanted to, there's also just trying to get people on camera, doing what you need to do to get them on camera, to say whatever they need to say. I found myself turning into a person I didn't want to be. And I felt also that I wanted to be more creative and tell different kinds of stories, and also work the equipment. I mean, so here I am with editing. I wanted to know how to work a camera. You couldn't do all that because it's a union shop. You couldn't touch anything.
Right.
And so it was at that point, and we're talking in the mid or early 90s, that I said, I'm leaving and I'm going to go to film school and learn how to be a filmmaker and learn that history and learn how to work that equipment. And that's what made me realize that, it was time to move on.
Got you. You took me back for a minute. I started smiling as I was listening to your story because I tried to get a gig at ABC and they wouldn't hire me. The gentleman told me I would get bored. I was just looking for a position because like you, I wanted time for my creativity and write. So it was something like a library position for their films. And I would have to take their films and code them and then put them up in the library. And I thought, great, I could sit in this room and I could do this. And in the interview, the guy was like, no. You're going to get bored. The next minute you'll be talking about moving on and moving up and it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. I already know. So I didn't get the job. I just wanted to write. I just wanted a space where I could write,
Oh. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. I guess maybe he did you a favor.
No, he actually did. I think that he could, he probably was right. I probably wouldn't have, after a couple of months of sitting in the room, even though I'm writing and I would have gotten curious about the other aspects of being there and wanting to grow within the construct of the company. So
right.
And more in broadcasting because that was the field I was studying. So he just said, no, we're not going to hire you. And that was okay. So what I want to do now is actually bring up your film. Which one? The Mary Lou Williams, the lady who sings the band, and talk about it. Let's talk about it. That was on Showtime.
Yes, it still is.
It still is. Wonderful. People can go check it out. Let's bring that up.
In Kansas City, there's a pretty gal named Mary Lou, and she plays up.
Mary Lou Williams is one of the greatest composer, arranger, and musicians in jazz history. Duke Ellington's highest form of praise was to say that someone was beyond category. Mary Lou Williams is beyond category.
The history of the music is in everything she writes. The blues is always there. It always swings. You can listen to her and only her and get what jazz is all about.
She's the lady who swings her. She's the lady who swings the band.
Mary Lou was always bucking against what the norm was and trying to expand this notion of what jazz was. She didn't want to be boxed in. She didn't want to be labeled.
her contribution to this music, make her a pioneer, irrespective of gender. But Mary Lou Williams is not well known because she's a woman. Music is so male-controlled that it's very difficult for women instrumentalists to get any respect.
If you want to really see some piano playing, let me know that there's a condition that exists that needs help. Then I'll do something. I'm like a big bear then doing it. I'll just go through all kind of changes to do good.
Thanks.
I'm so excited to watch your clips, even though I did see the show on Showtime.
Oh.
You know, what was your inspiration behind it? Like, what made you wake up one day and go, "Oh, I want to do the story about Mary Lou"?
So the story behind the story is that my father-in-law was he has passed, and I'm have since divorced, but he will always be my father-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
Was a jazz fan and had Mary Lou Williams playing on the stereo system one day, and this was a good 2000 and a good like 20 years ago at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And walked into the house, heard her playing, the CD, and I was like, wow, who is this? And he said, this is Mary Lou Williams. She's one of the greats. And I love jazz, had never heard of her. And I filed that, I was like, wow, that's so interesting that, I know jazz, I'd never heard this woman. But a year later, a book came out about her life. Called Morning Glory, the biography of Mary Lou Williams by Linda Dahl. Read it cover to cover, and I'm like, wow, I have to do it. This is it. I have to do a documentary on this woman. Like, how can nobody know who she is? Her life was so amazing, and this is a woman that spanned the decades of jazz.
Mm-hmm.
From the beginning to she died in 1981.
Mm-hmm.
Played with the greats, mentored the greats, composer, arranger, pianist, just a phenomenal icon. And yet no one really knew who she was. And I'm like, I have to do it. I have to. Do it. And thank God, I say to myself, I didn't know what I was getting into.
When you say that, the process of making the film, what was that process like? Share.
Wow. Okay. So it took 12 years to make the film, number one. Wow. And it's the process of researching, finding the money, and it took to make the film like $620,000, and that's not all that expensive for today. Today, documentaries can go way over $1 million. But it was also just at that same time I was working with other filmmakers as doing freelance work. This was when I was going from gig to gig, learning how to be a filmmaker and making my film at the same time. And so it just took that time to do the research, to get some money in, and then you get money, and then you from a grant, and then you shoot a little bit, and then you make a trailer, and then you get out of that money, and you go back and find work, gig work, and then it continues on and on.
Right.
Until I would say 2010, when I actually got a big grant from one of my major funders, Artivists, that allowed me to stop working gig work and finishing the documentary full time.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And it's a wonderful film. I encourage those of you who are listening to this show to actually go and watch it on Showtime. I thought it was only for Black History Month, and so I'm really happy to hear that it's on Showtime.
Yeah, thank
still.
you.
It's wonderful. What are you most proud of in your art and art form, and where are you looking to go in the future?
Well, I would say actually maybe the answer is combined in both of those questions. I really admire at this point. I'm really admiring documentaries that tell a story in sort of a visual, nonlinear, experimental mode. Documentary filmmakers that are trying to break new ground. And I say that's where I'm trying to go too. I'm interested in not telling stories necessarily in a didactic sort of talking head interview, archival footage, sort of breaking ground visually, telling a story more cinematically, more lyrically, and that's the journey I'm on right now for my next project.
Is there a and I like to say artist, but director or someone that you've seen whose work sort of that speaks to that? Is there a example of something that speaks to that?
Right. Yes. I would say one documentary filmmaker who is a friend, and inspiration and was a mentor for Mary Lou Williams is Thomas Allen Harris.
Okay.
And he did a documentary film called Emi Akara, means that's my face. And it was really just, as I'm saying, it was voiceover, but also just imagery that was really interestingly treated and told a very lyrical story about his experience in Brazil and being a gay Black man. He's done a lot of work since then, but that sort of made me say, after looking at that documentary, wow, wow, I like that. Let me try to sort of follow that vein.
Isn't it really great when another artist, in your particular field inspires you to grow? You sort of look at their work, not to mimic their work. You look at their work and it inspires you to explore the work that you do.
Exactly. Yes.
That.
Absolutely. And it's not just filmmakers, it's
right.
visual artists, and it's poets, and it's all art forms, it's writing, it's just, I get inspiration from all kinds of creativity. So yeah, it's always exciting.
So speaking about exciting, I'm excited just to kind of go back with you with some clips for Blueprint for My People, based on the poem by Margaret Walker, For My People. So let us look at that, and then let's talk about it, okay? Okay, great.
For my people everywhere, singing their slave songs repeatedly, their dirges and their ditties and their blues and jubilees, praying their prayers nightly to an unknown God, and bending their knees humbly to an unseen power. For my people lending their strength to the years, to the now years and the gone years and the may-be years, washing, ironing, cooking, scrubbing, sewing, mending, hoeing, digging, planting, pruning, patching, dragging along. Never gaining, never knowing, never reaping, and never understanding. For my playmates in the clay and dust and sand of Alabama backyards, playing, preaching, and doctor and jail and soldier and school and mama and cooking and playhouse and concert and store and Miss Chumby and hair and company. For the cramped, bewildered years, we went to school to learn, to know the reasons why, and the answers to, and the people who, and the places where, and the days when. In memory of the bitter hours, when we discovered we were black and poor and small and different, and nobody cared and nobody understood.
Wow. 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 Two things jumped out at me, and then we're just going to talk about it. But I just wanted, how you transitioned from historical footage to current, and the little girl with the thumb in the mouth reminded me of myself. I just looked at her and smiled. I said, "Yeah, I remember those days. You can't take my thumb from me." But, so, Margaret Walker, how did that come about for you?
Actually, it started. The poetry wasn't the way into this piece. It was actually the photographs. Mm-hmm. It was these blue photographs called cyanotypes. And so, just so people understand, those photographs they're blue. They weren't like treated. They weren't color corrected or anything. They were created by a process that creates a blueprint, cyanotypes. And in working on a previous documentary, I was an archival producer, and I came upon a collection of these blue photographs of African Americans, as you saw in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And I'm like, wow, I have never seen this before. Mm-hmm. These blue photographs are amazing, and they're beautiful. And so I was like, wow, I'm gonna do something with these photographs. And then it was just thinking about just how I could use these photographs to tell a story in a visual, nonlinear way about our journey as an African American people. And then came upon Margaret Walker and that incredible poem, For My People. And so I was like, okay, so that's the germ of the idea of just interweaving the music, the poetry, and also in telling our story, it's using the photographs as sort of harbingers of the past, but also, freeing up the chronology of our timeline in this country that's sort of put in contemporary and, to tell a story non-linearly, but to make it just as impactful that you get the sense of a journey of a people in this country.
Now, this is your next project?
Okay. Right. And so, the first thing I wanted that was a sample. I'm now editing it. And as you know, and I should tell the audience that
tell the audience.
Tell that audience that, and I wanted to have different voices for the poem. And so I asked you and Braf Maddock to redo the narration of the poem. And you guys did a phenomenal job because you riff back and forward, back and forth. I wanted a male and a female because it's a journey of a people.
Mhm.
And I gotta tell you, Poet Gold, it's like the soundtrack to the poem now is just the bomb. Because
Well, I can't wait to hear it. I think Raph is watching as well tonight, so I know we're both pretty anxious to hear
oh my
it.
God, I'm so grateful.
Yeah, no,
So
we're grateful. We're
so
grateful.
I have the groundwork, and a wonderful friend, Tony Jefferson, did the composition to the piece.
Okay.
And now it's just building. It's building a narrative, and that's where I'm at right now. It's building the visuals to the sound.
Fantastic.
So
I know it's going to be great work, and my hope is that it's another award-winning piece, because you are absolutely phenomenal as a documentary. We have mutual friends, and I told them that you were going to be on today, and you're like, Carol is the bomb.
Oh,
So I was like, oh, okay, great.
Thank you.
So let's talk about Artivism. And actually, no, before I get to that, let me ask this question because I'm just curious as to what your response is going to be. Someone submitted, when did you consciously decide to help save the world? So how are you going to take that question?
I wish I could save the world,
Right?
I wish I could go doink, like I Dream a Genie and just like, that's it.
Was it twitching your nose?
Like just, climate's restored and all the craziness. But yeah, so it's not, I'm not here to save the world. That's a collective thing that has to happen.
Yes.
But I think it's a matter of, what is it I want to do? What's my part in this to help make it a better place?
Right.
And I think that is through filmmaking, and it is through storytelling, and through that it's really trying to connect people with one another, and to help people understand, that we're all human. We all really want the same things. And I think, storytelling is so ancient that's whether it's verbally or whether it's through television or whether it's through dance or whatever have you, that's my contribution. It's just to add to the layer of storytelling that helps to transcend differences. And I made that decision, as I said before, when I was at CBS News. I said, this is not my path. My path is a different way. I want to be a filmmaker, and so I think that's the answer to that question.
Excellent. And and that is so I think incredibly important because that speaks into stepping into your life's gifts. And so often we get stuck in a construct of what we think we should be doing or what we've been told to do, these boxes and these boundaries that we, it's a little hard to muster up the courage. And say, I'm going to step into my gift, and where it takes me is where it takes me. Not knowing that once you step into your life, then the world brings to you everything that you need. It may take a little time, it may not come when you think it's going to come, but it comes. It comes. You just have to make sure that you're there when it arrives.
Couldn't have said it better. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, it's not a job, right? It's a journey, and it's an exploration, and it's fulfilling.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Carol, I want to thank you so much, for being on. Is there something that you want the audience to know about you? Or what's coming up, or any particular other project that you may have coming up?
I have a lot of projects coming up, but but I'm just going to focus. I would just say you can always follow what I'm doing by checking out my website, which is paradoxfilms.tv. I'm on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Carol Bash, just Google me, friend me, follow me. I'm always posting about what I'm doing. So, and just thanking everybody for tuning in and listening.
Absolutely. Follow her, fund her, so we can get more great work, out of you, because your work is really phenomenal. I'm so glad that you reached out and emailed and whoever referred. I don't even remember how it happened, but I'm grateful.
No,
I'm
thank
grateful.
you. Thank you for your work.
I'm grateful. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Leading with Artivism. I'm your host, Poet Gold. Be sure to tune in next month. I believe we're the fourth Thursday of every month, and we love having you present. Carol, thank you.
Thank you, Poet Gold.
And thank you, Kristen and Kate, for all the support. They're backstage, folks. You can't see them, but this could never happen without Arts Mid-Hudson and Kate and Kristen and Melissa and the team. I appreciate you all.